me this, riddle me that. How long has it been since you saw this picture?
In the 27 years since the theatrical release of 1995's Batman Forever, it represented a tone shift in the series' direction. Those that witnessed Batman Returns in 1992, they saw that the movie went full-on Tim Burton, and it went darker than executives, critics, and audiences would care for. Despite decent performances from Danny DeVito, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Michael Keaton as Penguin, Catwoman, and Batman respectively, the movie was seen as too dark for promotional merchandise, considering they were marketing toys and McDonald's Happy Meals to children. So, with the advent of the third movie and Tim Burton being done with directing Batman, the reins was handed to Joel Schumacher, which also meant Michael Keaton's departure. His thinking was, with the tone being lightened, it was missing the point of the character. That, and on a trivial note, as soon as he heard there would be nipples on the Batsuit, he 86'd out of there.
If he hated that, he'd hate to see what they did to George Clooney in 1997.
With the Iceman himself, Val Kilmer, taking up the role of the Dark Knight, he would join regulars in Pat Hingle, Michael Gough, alongside newcomers in Chris O'Donnell, Tommy Lee Jones, arguably one of the greatest comic actors in Jim Carrey, and the beautiful and very talented Nicole Kidman as the latest love interest of Bruce Wayne.
Will this be seen as a misunderstood 90s flick, or is it possible, through the passage of time, it will finally be appreciated? Let's find out as we go Batman Forever.
I think in a lot of ways, this sequel was able to keep the darkness of Batman that had been present in the 89 original, but continued it in a way where you can still feel the emotional weight of what Bruce Wayne had endured in the time since his parents' murder. In the essence of that, the fight choreography is less violent and is more brief compared to some of the fights that Batman was in the previous two. And it's toned back on the sight of blood, which, if you recall from the 89 movie, Bat did get banged and bloodied up in his showdown with Jack Nicholson's Joker.
Which for my money is still hands down the best version of the Joker. Changed my mind.
What this entry into what has become known as the Anthology series, it's more of a reflective and contemplative version of Bruce and explores more of Batman's origin, which had only been explored in flashbacks in the first Michael Keaton movie. The scene of his parents' wake would see Bruce running into the night with a red leather journal that his father had entered into every day of his life, and then seen the monstrous image of a bat after he'd fallen into the cave.
I think of this as fate sending him down a path where he can use his fear against the fearful. Now, think of it this way: if you can master your fear, you can weaponize it.
This was around the time that Bruce was becoming a mentor figure to a recently orphaned Dick Grayson of the Flying Graysons. The movie stays true to the comic book origin of Robin, in which his family dies in a tragic accident. What I like that they did with this interpretation is that we see the early signs of him being a hero when he discards the bomb that Two-Face had left in the circus, all because Bat failed to save him from Boss Maroney. This also marked the first big screen appearance of the mob boss. He wouldn't appear again until 2008's The Dark Knight.
And speaking of Two-Face,
this was a much different take on what would have been reprised by Billy D. Williams, who some of you may know better as Lando Calrissian from Star Wars. He originally played Gotham's district attorney in the 89 Batman, and he was set to reprise his role. But Joel Schumacher had other ideas and he wanted Tommy Lee Jones.
Let's be real, the writing made the character camp and way too comical. If this was like an homage to the 60s Batman series, then fine, but considering the very serious nature and tone of the first two movies, it kind of felt like it was being a parody.
The whole point of the character is that he's meant to be a tragic story. A man suffering from split personality disorder that shows it mentally and physically through his scarred face and the change in his demeanor, of which Batman the Animated Series did a masterful job of telling his story.
Two-Face just came across as being campy and flamboyant, almost like a copy of the Riddler, except with facial scarring and two-tone attire. And speaking of the Riddler, I think the writing was just letting Jim Carrey be Jim Carrey. You can use your own imagination on that.
The Riddler is a character that arguably has the same intellect of Batman, as it takes someone of his intelligence to see through his riddles. Like with Two-Face, the Riddler just comes across as a camp and flamboyant figure that seems reminiscent of the 1960s Batman. What I do like is how the writing shows how betrayed Edward Nygma feels from Bruce Wayne's denial of his work, and becomes obsessed in getting his attention and trying to prove he is his better.
Well, at least he didn't make Bats go after Riddler trophies.
And then you have the complication of Dr. Chase Meridian being thrown into the mix. We see her as a specialist consultant for multiple personality disorder and someone that Bruce seeks out as he has problems with his repressed memories.
And that's another thing. I like how Dr. Chase Meridian wants the man behind the cowl, and not the reverse.
I feel like that's a message for anyone. Your loved ones want you for you, and not what you are.
I don't think anybody could sum up the theme of duality better than this exchange between Batman and the Riddler.
You see, I'm both Bruce Wayne and Batman. Not because I have to be. Now, because I choose to be.
For 2 hours, it felt like a balanced movie. In the context of, it was much more family friendly, but it stayed true to where it came from.
Val brings to the table a slightly more contemplative Batman where he sees repressed memories from his parents' wake and he's not really that sure what to make of it. I think most people would feel out of balance if they suddenly started remembering painful memories they tried to repress. I would say that Kilmer has slightly more emotional range than his predecessor, Michael Keaton. But then, I would make the point of saying that Michael Keaton's Batman was quintessential as he's meant to be a quiet figure of the shadows. Okay, this was a real big deal at the time as Chris was the first live-action Robin on screen since Burt Ward's portrayal in the 60s series. Chris portrays Grayson with a lot of anger and confusion for someone who's seeking answers, of which Michael Gough's Alfred highlights.
Young men with a mind for revenge need little encouragement. They need guidance. You, above all, should know the consequences of the life you choose.
He's got a good rapport, more with Michael Gough than he does with Kilmer, as the story really had Bruce trying to deter Grayson from going down the same path, purely from his experience, and he didn't want to see someone else be burdened with what he chose to take up. If this was a brand new character that wasn't Harvey Dent, then I think people would have been fine with it. I didn't really see any duality with Jones other than he wore a two-tone suit and have sugar and spice that would represent his calmer and darker sides. I think had the story played much more true to the comics, then Jones would have gone with a different tone and be less comical.
Spank me.
Jim, you know this is PG, right?
Joygasm!
Don't make me say it again.
Look, I'm gonna be honest here. At this point in the 90s, whether it was The Mask or Ace Ventura, Carrey would essentially keep playing those roles in other movies. Whether it was The Cable Guy,
We don't talk about that movie.
and even into the 2000s where he would play Bruce Almighty. That's actually a good movie. I think the makers went after Carrey because he knew how to chew the scene and he was the it guy for comedy. He plays the obsessive fan well and then showing disdain when rejected by his idol, and then the lengths he would go to get Bruce's attention.
All that was missing was, "Notice me, senpai," and the cliche would have been complete.
Notice me! No!
Nicole was used sparingly in comparison to Kim Basinger and Michelle Pfeiffer as the Dark Knight's love interest, and she acts more of emotional support to both him and his alter ego in Bruce Wayne. She plays a professional that is fascinated clinically and amorously. She wants to get into his head and under his cape.
I'll bring the wine. You bring your scarred psyche.
Direct, aren't you?
If you wanted to be any more direct, she would have only been wearing that jacket. What is there to say? He was Alfred Pennyworth.
Michael reprises his role, making his third appearance on screen as Batman's butler and surrogate father, and he simply got better with each movie. I think the key to a good Alfred portrayal is having the right level of dignity, loyalty, constructive critiquing, and above all else, dry wit. He acts as moral and emotional support to both Bruce and Richard, trying to get both men to see the best in themselves, and that broken wings mend in time. He just had this wonderful, grandfatherly warmth about him to where you could confide in him and he would support and understand you. Michael would reprise his role for a final time in the series with 1997's Batman and Robin.
And suffice to say, he was one of the very few saving graces of that train wreck.
Okay, real talk here. As good as Hingle was in these movies, he never really did much. Almost to the point where he was essentially a background character. This is something that Nolan and Goyer would really address in the 2005 reboot in Batman Begins, where Gordon is a much more central character to the plot.
In this, he just has a few scenes, and then he's gone again. What is there to say about this lady that you didn't already know? She's a sweetheart.
Drew's performance as the representation of Den's lighter side as she dresses in elegant white dresses and offering up dishes that are befitting of that of a classy banquet. She speaks with a soft-spoken and sultry tone that really makes this character alluring. Also, people back in the day that would play Batman Forever on the SNES and Mega Drive, Genesis in the States, probably got more than what they bargained for when Bats would fight her and Spice 2 where... well, a picture speaks 1,000 words.
I think Kaiju Noir has the best response for this. Yep.
She doesn't have many speaking lines as opposed to her lighter side in Drew Barrymore, but for what little she's given, she makes the most of it. She doesn't chew the scene as much as Tommy, but she tries as someone dressing as his darker side in attire, cuisine, and furniture setting. Two cameos I was not expecting to see in the cast list quarter of a century later are En Vogue and Jon Favreau. En Vogue are the women who see Robin exit the Batmobile, and Favreau is just credited as an assistant. Rick Baker, who you may remember as the man responsible for the werewolf makeup for 1980's An American Werewolf in London, and the remake of The Wolfman in 2010, did the prosthetic makeup for Two-Face, and for all the crap I give how that character was represented, at the very least the character was decently represented visually. The visual effects were decent, along with Pacific data images being employed to contribute to the movie. They even created a digital Batman for stunts that would be considered too complicated to do with a live stuntman.
The effects served in enhancing the scenes, as opposed to modern comic book movies where the scenes enhance the effects.
In scenes where Bats would jump from ledges or scale heights courtesy of the grappling hook, you get a sense of how much bigger these scenes feel. As for the vehicles, I'll be straight with you, this ain't my most favoured Batmobile. My least favoured would appear in the sequel. For the look of this car, it's okay. It's not the Burton-mobile, but then again, what is? But for the look and tone of the movie, where it's lighter and more colourful, this Batman reflects that. The Batwing, Batsub, and Batboat do their job until Two-Face and Riddler play live-action Battleship.
At least it wasn't as bad as the Battleship movie.
So, the effects, they do their job. Elliot Goldenthal took over from Danny Elfman as the composer for the Batman franchise.
Despite my criticism down the years of Elfman's lack of range until Terminator 4, for Batman, he was a tough act to follow.
Goldenthal's credits range from Aliens 3, Interview with a Vampire, Final Fantasy The Spirits Within, very underrated I might add, and 1993's Demolition Man, which, if you pay subtle attention to the score, there are similarities. Elliot took cues from Elfman's Batman theme mainly just to be the hook before he would branch his take on the score into his own. This theme would be the template for Batman for this movie and its sequel before the franchise went into hiatus until 2005's reboot of Batman Begins. The score really helps to enhance Bruce and Richard's stories as it adds emotional weight to their pain of loss and how they grieve and live with it. In a similar way to how the score really complements the romantic and, let's call it like it is, the sexual tension between Bats and Meridian.
Oh, please. If it was any more obvious, they'd be playing porno music to this. Don't lie to me. You're all picturing it.
I'll bring the wine. You bring your scarred psyche.
Direct, aren't you?
And now you can't get it out of your head. You're welcome.
Comedy and hypothetical fanfiction aside, the score does a more than decent job of painting the emotion of this movie and its integral characters in the torment they've been through. The movie took in $336.6 million off a $100 million budget. And when you put in 27 years of inflation, it would be worth $621.2 million. The movie took in some favourable feedback. One excerpt from Rolling Stone's Peter Travers has this to say: "Batman Forever still gets in its licks. There's no fun machine this summer that packs more surprises." He was, however, critical of the tone. The script misses the pain Tim Burton caught in a man tormented by the long-ago murder of his parents. He did, however, praise Kilmer's performance as deftly understated. Brian Lowry of Variety said, "One does have to question the logic behind adding nipples to the hard rubber batsuit. Whose idea was that supposed to be anyway? Alfred's?"
And it's something we're trying to forget.
U2 and Seal provided songs for the soundtrack. U2's Hold Me, Thrill Me, Kiss Me, Kill Me was nominated at the Golden Globes for Best Song and for Worst Original Song at the Razzies.
Ouch!
Seal won the Best Song at the 1996 MTV Movie Awards, of which Joel Schumacher directed the music video. Even though the song wasn't played in the background during the movie, Joel included it in the credits and the soundtrack because he liked Seal's song so much. The movie had promotional tie-ins with McDonald's and, as mentioned earlier, a video game adaptation by then publication Acclaim Entertainment, in which you take on the antagonists of Batman, Robin, or Batman and Robin with cooperative or uncooperative duo modes.
The movie has been enjoyed on VHS, DVD, Blu-ray, and 4K since 1995. I'm MJ Knight, and this was Batman Forever. I think of this as fate sending him down a path where he can use his fear against the fear fuel. Fear fuel? Fear fuel? Today at 5-star gasoline. Fearful! Fear what the police will put into your tanks. Yo, yeah, that's a blooper. Rain's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna stock up on Fearful. And for Oni, yeah, Fearful is when Lydia smiles with a mischievous grin. Let's go, okay, I'm not that bad. Raiden. Right. Love your lids, but you sometimes put fear into Oni. I approve. For 2 hours, it felt like a balanced movie. In the context of it was much more. We be Scottish Batman, laddie. That's the worst Scottish impression ever. No doubt my bro's gonna be like, you rank amateur, move over. This is how you do it, Billy Godley style. Does that even sound Scottish? Apologies if anyone's been offended, but that's like the worst Scottish impression ever. My bad. The effects served in enhancing the scenes, as opposed to modern comic book movies where the scenes are to enhance the effects. Okay, never heard of that. Is there like a new version of FedEx that I've never heard about? Move over, FedEx, here's NFAX. What?